Mic testing.
Testing. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are the Maestros. As you may remember, we are a fast-paced and accessible real-time strategy game for the PC, and we're building it in Unreal UDK. So, over the last 8 weeks, we have been building the basic mechanics, the building blocks, and the tools that will allow us to iterate very quickly on new content, new mechanics, etc. So we'd like to walk you through some of those things today and talk about our gameplay and how it's evolved. So Min, if you could bring up the game. So like a lot of other games these days, we've built a patcher, which has been as much of a tool for distributing the game as it has been for actually development. So our engineers, Sean and Ben, have built a build and deploy system to go along with this patcher that allow us to compile all of the latest code, assets, and dependencies from the game, deploy it to one of several patch lines that allow us to keep one stable build for externals, industry mentors, showing off to the professors, things like that. One weekly build that we're able to play on as a team and get a feel for our game. And another internal build that we can push to rapidly as we need to work on full stack work, front end and back end, across different engineering disciplines especially. So from there, let's jump into the game. As you get started here, as with a lot of other RTSs, the first thing that's really going to strike you is the user interface. Now, of course, we have some temp art in there, and a lot of the stuff you'll see is work in progress, looping animations and things like that. We'll smooth out over the next 8 weeks. But there's definitely a lot less user interface than you might see in a game like StarCraft or Command & Conquer, where you have the grid system on the bottom, known as the command card with all your buttons and things like that. This is a big sort of mental barrier to people playing the game for the first time. We've done away with that, and we're going to go with 2 smaller bars, one for selecting different types of units and one for using your abilities. And these are going to be a one-to-one mapping from a button to an effect. The effect being, in this case, if you press F2, you're always going to select your commander. If you click on that button, also always select your commander. And we'll have a similar thing for abilities. Because we have a small, finite number of units, we can do this, and only using 5 or 6 keys. So from there, I would like to have our lead designer, James Corcoran, take you through some of the mechanics of the game.
So right now, Min's controlling the commander unit in the army, and this is the most important unit that a player can control. Right now, we're aiming for a 3v3 experience, and if your commander dies, you lose the rest of your army, and you respawn if you have enough lives left. Obviously, a kill on the commander will result in losing a life. But the game wouldn't be an RTS with a wide variety of units. So Min's going to walk over to these guys kind of mind their own business, doing a little dance right here. And he's going to right-click them until they die. So what happens after this is you can see a bunch of red units popping up. And these are called doughboys. They're very weak units, and they're what are given to you after you kill one of these neutral units. Sorry. They're what are given to you after you kill one of these neutral units. So with these, he can now bring them over to a transform point and transform them into a more powerful unit or a unit with different utility. So he's going to bring them down to the conductor station and transform them into conductors. So you can see a conductor popped up right now. This is a unit that deals a massive amount of electrical damage chaining between every single conductor that is on the map. But let's say he changes his mind. He says, I don't really want a conductor anymore. I actually want an oiler. I think it would benefit my team better. A unit that does massive amount of slow to a group of units. So he can sell this conductor back into doughboys, and he can bring those over. You need one more. And make an oiler. So that's kind of how the game progresses, is you kill neutrals to build up your army, and then you can convert them into other units and change your strategy on the fly. And now I'm going to bring up John right here. He's a dedicated designer on the team. He's going to talk about what we've been doing behind the scenes while the game was in its primitive stages of development to design around these systems.
Hey everyone. So due to the nature of our game, the design team had to answer a lot of questions this first half of the semester. To do that, we worked on a series of StarCraft 2 prototypes over 20 different iterations, and it led to an awesome result, like an idealistic iterative process. So questions that we answered through this prototype were stuff like, how should commanders work? What is our resource system and how should it work as well? What unit ideas are good and what unit ideas are not good? And finally, what map styles work best with our game and what map sizes work best with our game? What you see here is some of the iterations of the map. These were all design driven by our designer, Alex, who is one of our level designers, through the data gathered on these prototypes. The one on the right is our current state of the map. These are just some of the other iterations. There's way more than this. But yeah, and another thing that designers worked on is this awesome balancing sheet. So this specifically was worked on by designers James and Calvin. And this has been extremely useful as it's helped us balance units even if we can't get into UDK. Because we can't test all the units in because they're not all in there yet. So the way this works is there's a point allocation system. There's, say, every single unit has 50 points, and they can put all of them into the stats. So they put, let's say, every single unit has 50, so you put 1 into health, and it gives it 20 more health. You put 1 point into DPS, it gives it 1 more DPS. And you keep doing that until you fill out all the allocation points, and since every single unit has the same amount of allocated points, it's somewhat balanced. Another thing that designers worked on was this awesome UDK playground map, which specifically Evan Stern and other of our designers worked on testing the feel of movement and testing the feel of combat, as well as testing the feel of abilities in the maps. So we are now moving to UDK because this first half of the semester is done and we really need to polish up the game, design-wise. So to help us with that are the design tools, and specifically to talk about them is Conrad.
Thanks, John. So as you guys saw, design came up with a great spreadsheet for all this data for all these units. But you know, we were trying to figure out how do we get all this data, all these units into the game without those pesky designers going to the code, possibly breaking stuff, and all their engineers just scratching their heads. So we came up with this design tool, and what this design tool does is allow us to update units in real time and actually make new units while playing the game instantly. So there's been one unit I really want to see in the game. It's the Conrad God unit. So we're going to go ahead and make that guy right now. So type in my name, you know, give my health like 9,000 health. You know, I want to be, let's be a droplet. I want to be a droplet. Let's save that guy. You know, let's give myself ability, you know, I can attack, you know, because I want to kill other people in this game. So give it a range of, 8,000. Seems about fair, attack across the map. Let's do some damage, 9,000, insta-kill. It's always good. Attack speed, let's do 5,000. It's a nice round number again. So let's save that, and we'll save all the units. All right, so awesome. So we've now exported the Karna God unit that can be read and now played into the game. So Min will now update all the units, and it'll read in that JSON, and now let's spawn the Karna God unit. Bam, there he is. There's the Karna God, and he has all the stats that, the designer would throw in. They can quickly prototype on these units, allow for rapid iteration, which is really key in RTS games. There's a lot of balancing that goes on. So now that we've seen a lot, kind of what's going on in the back end, and let's go over to Brian and see what he has to say about making Maestros look pretty.
So, assuming that design gives us a very clear vision of what they want for a particular unit, I'm just going to quickly overview specifically for character units. So, once design gives us something that's clear, it takes our concept artists 2 weeks to concept out something for a particular unit. A lot of bickering and talking and discussion during that process, and once that final render is done, we send it off to the character artists, who take another 2 weeks to get it modeled and textured and ready for rigging. And then once that model is done, we send it off to Cameron McLeese, our technical lead rigger and VFX artist, to give to one of our riggers to get a rig for animation. That takes about a week or a couple days at most. And then we send it off to Megan, our lead animator, to hand it off to one of our animators who take another 2 weeks to complete animations, ranging from basic run cycles to a couple idle animations that we need, a bare minimum as it were. So, and at the back end of things, there's VFX that they attach their emissions of like fire or muzzle flashes once the animations are done. Throughout this whole process is very iterative, just starting from concept all the way to VFX. And the primary way we've been managing to do this is through our Facebook development group page. Artists are encouraged to and required to post up work in progress shots of what they're working on, be that sketches or animations, and they can expect within 24 hours one of 2 reactions. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty! It's amazing! Or, like the gun barrel on the cannon right now is a little too small. I think we need to exaggerate the size so it shows up better in game. So not only does this help us achieve better art for the game eventually, it also provides all the artists who are not geographically in the same locations as USC to feel a better sense of camaraderie, especially communicating with not only the other artists and me, as well as the designers, the engineers, basically anybody on the team can comment on these work in progress shots. So with such a large team, and considering that we have a lot, like over 40 people on the team, it takes a lot of manpower and a lot of good leadership to keep us all together. And one of the probably most important positions on the team is our producer, and to talk about how he reins in everything together and make sure we get stuff done on time and at best quality as possible, I'd like to introduce Min.
Right. Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Thanks, Brian. So none of this would be possible without the hard work and dedication of our 46 extremely talented team members. But with such a large team, it gets a little, convoluted to keep everyone on task and make sure that everyone's contributing one way or another. So what we use is something called the SIME task board. If you have never heard of it, that's because it did not exist before August 2013. It was made by yours truly, James Bergeron, and it's simply just a very robust Excel spreadsheet. So here's this task board. The task board is separated into 3 different task sheets, one for engineering, one for design, and one for art. At the beginning of each sprint, the leads will sit down with their department and go over everything that needs to be completed by that sprint to meet the milestones that we have put into place.
Brian,
So,
move it into 6 months.
not yet. But I'll get to that later. But this can be a little bit overwhelming. Obviously, we have to do a lot each sprint, and there's just too much for one person to handle. So we have something intuitive for the user, our team members, something called a task lookup. So if you click on EL1, it stands for Engineering Lookup 1. Right now, it shows Conrad's tasks. These are everything that Conrad needs to do that's been assigned by Drew. But let's say my name is Keithan Tellis, and I want to check out what tasks I have to do. So I'll just type it in, and that's my task for the sprint so far. Another thing that I want to bring your attention to, Drew, if you could click on the engineering task board again, is the column that we have called, that's labeled SP. SP stands for story points. It's one of the metrics that we use to kind of gauge the size and complexity of each task. This is good for 2 reasons. One, it makes sure that the leads and we're not giving one person too many tasks over the course of a sprint, and to make sure that another person is not like underworked, essentially. The second reason why it's really crucial to our production is that it gives us a very good idea of how fast we are producing and developing the game. So back in Sprint 1, which ended mid-September, we tested out about 200 story points, but we only got around to about 100, so that's about 50%. But in Sprint 2, we readjusted and made sure that we readjusted our milestones and kind of gauged it from there. And out of the 300 story points that we tested out, we accomplished over 90%. So that's a vast improvement. And now, Brian, if you could bring out that task board. Something else that we really like this task board, and we wanted to have a way to visualize it. Yeah, come in a little bit closer. This thing, we just bought it about 2 weeks ago. It's a bulletin board, very simple, but we repurposed it into our Scrum board that we use weekly at our Scrum meetings. It's been very effective so far, but since we've only had it for 2 weeks, we'll see where this takes us. So we finished Sprint 1 and 2. We're going to Sprint 3. And going to demo day, we made a lot of progress. It's been a lot of architectural stuff on the engineering end. But by demo day, we will have the UI built up, and it will be robust all across the board. You'll be able to select your commander in a way that's very reminiscent of a fighting game. And lastly, we will have our first race completed, the Teutonian race. We're actually 1 unit away from it, and we've already started concepting the Alchemist race. So, with that, that concludes our progress with the Maestros. If we have any room or any time left, I would like to field for questions. Any questions?
Do you want to show multiplayer? You got it. You can do it.
You got it working?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just have to join.
Show it.
Alrighty, well, we're going to show off multiplayer.
USC Wireless is being kind to us today and letting us show you the networking multiplayer of our game. So,
Wi-Fi gods are very fickle, as you know.
and as I say that, watch it.
Alright, fingers crossed.
Anyways, so
Other questions?
the general point was everything that you saw in the single player mode is completely networked, and we can play in a 3v3 match, which is our target. When we have internet connections, of course, those are required for that. But now, if you have any questions,
If you have any other questions.
I saw one back there before.
Thank you.
Wires. Just like we did before.
With so many team members, what's been the biggest problem? You talked about how you solve the problems with the Facebook page and it's working. What hasn't worked? Even though I guess I have like 20 external artists, right?
Yes, we have about 25 like at USC, and then about 20 external. It's one thing that's been the big struggle is our external artists getting jobs.